I'll recognize the honourable member from Banff Cochrane, followed by Vermilion Woodminster.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. My name is the member for Banff Cochrane, and I'm here to ask for $1,000 in exchange for 20% of my plasma. Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, that is how the Wild Rose would have us do things here in Alberta. Pitching essential services on a Dragon's Den-style reality TV show where nurses are pitted against teachers, special needs children are Jeez.
It's been raised. The honourable member for Calgary Law.
Not too sure how many times this is going to happen, in which the honourable, I'll say honourable, member for Banff Cochrane, through the chair, right? Right. 23 HI&J, making allegations against a member, false or unavowed motives, abusive or insulting language. We don't need the blues. We all heard it. It just happened here. And, Madam Speaker, I'm asking you to rule on this because this is a terrible trend. Please, check my tweets from this morning about our health minister. We need to be respectful and have an exchange of ideas that is for the betterment of Albertans and not about party politics, especially when it comes to things like the very lives, health, and quality of life of Alberta.
Honourable Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm not sure if it's a concentrated campaign on this particular member from Banff Cochrane, but he had earlier in the week there was a similar situation where every time he got to speak, someone called a point of order. They were found to be wrong, to do not be point of orders, I think 4 times in a row. This is another time, I think we're counting number 5 now, where this is, again, not a point of order. He's standing up, giving his opinion, barely started in on that opinion when he already got a point of order. Now I'm sure that the Madam Speaker, you will rule that this yet is not a point of order yet again. But I, for one, am getting tired of this concentrated campaign against this particular member, and I wish it to stop. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Madam Speaker.
Lac-La-Biche St. Paul, Two Hills.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And it's unfortunate that the member stood up before the honourable member got to sewer rats, but we'll carry on from here. The question I have is that the member constantly gets up to speak to bills, but he never speaks to the topic at hand. He never even mentioned plasma. Selling his plasma.
Honourable member.
Through the chair, please.
The honourable member for Lac-La-Biche St. Paul, Two Hills has the floor, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. What we would ask is, when members, I've got a speech here on this issue. The honourable member from Fort McMurray Wood Buffalo spoke quite eloquently, stuck to the matter at hand. That's all we're asking is if we're going to have a debate on blood plasma and the sale of blood plasma in Canada or the purchasing of blood plasma in Canada, let's stick to the issue and have a debate on that issue. If you want to throw insults back and forth, we can do that in question period. Thank you.
You already had the Deputy Government House Leader has spoken on. Did you wish to add something on your?
Yes, may I add to the point of order, Madam Speaker? Madam Speaker, here in the legislature, what we're here to do is have an exchange of ideas, and those ideas should be subject to scrutiny. Well, and Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, these ideas are subject to standing orders, Madam Speaker. And what I was simply doing is describing what the Wild Rose said yesterday about how they would plan to vet essential public services against one another in a Dragon's Den-style reality TV show. They said it themselves. And so here I am trying to talk about plasma, how important it is to Albertans, an essential service, and I'm criticizing the ideas that the Wild Rose has. I think they should allow me the opportunity to...
Excuse me, can you finish saying what you want to say?
They should allow me to speak on behalf of my constituents. Exactly. I work in the health industry, and I know why this is important.
Honourable members, I don't want to see this morning deteriorate into another back and forth of points of order and insults being thrown across the aisle. I'm not going to find a point of order in this particular one, but I will caution the member, and I know this is not the first time, as pointed out by the Deputy Government House Leader. This will be the 5th time. Please be aware of relevance. We're speaking to this bill, and please, all honourable members, be aware of the terminology that you use. We do not need to inflame each other. Let's be constructive here. Thank you. Go ahead.
Take that point.
Madam Speaker, you know the Wild Rose can dish it out, but they can't take it. Here we are talking about paid plasma donation. Madam Speaker.
Honourable members, Banff Cochrane has the floor.
Madam Speaker, plasma is too precious to be left up to the free market. That's the point I'm trying to make, Madam Speaker. If the members would stop interrupting, they might actually listen and learn from someone who's experienced in this field. I've thought about this long and hard, Madam Speaker, and I prepared what I was going to say today, and these folks over here don't like to hear the truth, and they want to silence me because they know what I have to say isn't helpful for their cause. So, Madam Speaker, when we try to vet ideas against one another on things like Dragon's Den, there are winners and losers. They talk about picking winners and losers all the time. You know who shouldn't be losers, Madam Speaker? Is people in surgery that are undergoing emergency surgery. But these folks are opposed to the idea that we should allow people to voluntarily give their blood. The member from Fort McMurray talked in his speech about how we give blood freely and voluntarily. And on the other hand, he argued about then how we should pay people to give blood. So he's talking out both sides of his mouth. He's opposing the bill. And, Madam Speaker, this is a trend in the Wild Rose. They let evidence get away from them. They turn away from evidence. So, Madam Speaker, he mentioned what the situation is in Saskatchewan and how Saskatchewan has moved to a paid plasma donation. And Madam Speaker, you know, they're chirping over there about evidence and laughing about evidence, and that doesn't surprise me. I mean, look at what they said about climate change. The member for Innisfell-Sylvan Lake said, "Show me the evidence." Well, the evidence is out there. You just have to look, honourable members. And you know, I think you need to do your jobs on behalf of your constituents and look at the evidence, because what you're saying is absolutely wrong, and it's going to put Albertans at risk. It's going to put Albertans at risk, Madam Speaker. I'd like to read at length from a CBC article published just this past December about the situation in Saskatchewan. The title of the article, Madam Speaker, is "Canadian Blood Services Says Paid Plasma Clinics Are Harming Voluntary Donations." So, Madam Speaker, while these people over there idolize Saskatchewan, that has provincial sales tax, healthcare premiums, much higher taxes than we do here in Alberta, they're looking to Saskatchewan as a model. But, Madam Speaker, I can tell you, and I'll read from the article to illustrate here, that what the Wild Rose is proposing is dangerous for Albertans. So let's have a listen to what the CBC has to say when they interviewed the experts in Saskatchewan. Well, you know, the honourable members question the CBC on the other side. This is our national broadcaster, Madam Speaker. It's something, you know, I know they prefer to listen to Rebel Media.
Honourable members, Banff Cochrane has the floor, and the honourable member will table the article once he's read. Go ahead.
Absolutely, Madam Speaker. I'd be happy to table the article. You know, on the other side, they prefer Rebel Media for their news, and on this...
Point of order has been raised. The honourable member for Grimby Rocky Mountain House.
We were just here, Madam Speaker. I think you were pretty clear about trying to keep the decorum and not using. Thanks to the member from Fort Saskatchewan, Vegreville. I really enjoy hearing her during the point of order, but I'm trying to talk to the speaker. You were very clear about keeping the decorum and making comments that would deteriorate it. The Speaker was very clear yesterday. This member continues to do that. But with that said, Madam Speaker, the member knows full well that he does not know which preferred media of anybody in the House is, so it's just a silly argument, and he should maybe continue with some of the important things that he's trying to talk about.
Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Find this quite perplexing when the very member that stood up on that point of order just told the member that the CBC was not a good news source, and then stands up and saying you can't tell what individual gets a news source from. So very perplexing, very confusing. What it isn't is a point of order. Madam Speaker, this is a continuing campaign against this particular member. I wish it to stop, and I encourage you not to tell the member that it was somehow in shape or form he incited this. I don't believe that's any shape or form that's what happened. For one thing, this is not is a point of order, and it's taken away from the work this Assembly should be doing. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Deputy Government House Leader, I think, as well as Opposition House Leader, third-party House Leader, I think every member in this House wants this to stop, as you just said. And that will happen if we abide by these rules. We've referred to H, I, and J. We've referred to H, I, and J on a number of occasions. There was an allegation made, that was clear. That's H, I, false or unavowed motives. Why would he say that? It's J, abusive and insulting language. I will commend this member for the one statement that he made earlier. It was a good point. It was made in the third person. It made the point very well. It did not contravene any of these standing orders, including 23 H, I, and J. I would like to hear the rest of the speech. I would like to hear it according to the standing orders. They're there for a reason, so that people won't be interrupted on either side of the House. I once again refer to the fact that this morning I wrote a rather complimentary tweet about the health minister and the abuse she's received. I don't want him to receive abuse, but I can tell you the world is watching. Please be respectful, and people will respect you.
Just briefly on the point of order, Madam Speaker, we're here in this chamber allowed to express opinions in matter of debate. The fact that I think that their preferred news source is Rebel Media is bolstered by the fact that they appear at rallies sponsored by this news organization. Madam Speaker, it's just my opinion. So I think they should allow me to express my opinion, and that's all I'm asking for.
Honourable members, I'm not going to call this a point of order, but again, I did hear inflammatory comments from both sides. Please, tone it down, keep things to the bill at hand, and let's be conscious of the words that we use so that we are respectful. Please continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So what I was getting to is talking about Canadian Blood Services. You know, I respect that this is a news article from CBC, which some members may not appreciate, but in the article they interview CBS, Canadian Blood Services experts. So that's what I'm trying to get at, Madam Speaker. So here we go. The head of the Canadian Blood Services says the agency plans to open dozens more collection facilities in the coming years amid signs it is losing volunteer donors to for-profit clinics that pays people to give plasma. Canadian Plasma Resources, a private operator that gives gift cards to plasma donors, opened a collection facility in Saskatoon in February. Although the National Blood Agency said in April that paying donors for plasma was an option, it has now ruled that out. They go on to describe what plasma is. The CEO of Canadian Blood Services is quoted as saying, "There's market confusion as to who is operating in the Saskatoon market. Donor numbers have also dropped in that city." Quote, "We've begun to see some early impacts of having this private for-profit enterprise operate in our jurisdiction," end quote. The CEO goes on to say that it is early evidence, but is certainly consistent with what other countries are seeing when you see large-scale ramp-up of paid plasma industry side by side with the blood industry. We in Canada are at risk if we don't collect more of our own plasma, that we're not going to be able to access the global supply of these plasma drugs. We have to collect more plasma, control it, and keep it in Canada for Canadian patients, which the private industry is not obligated to do. They will sell it to the highest bidder. Madam Speaker, that was the point I was trying to make with Dragon's Den. Demand for pharmaceuticals derived from plasma is increasing by up to 10% a year in Canada. There's similar growth in the US, Australia, and Europe, and it's anticipated China and India will clamor for more too. I'll skip to the part where it talks about undercutting volunteers. Michael Decter was an advisor to the Creever Commission into the tainted blood scandal and is a former deputy health minister in Ontario. He's quoted as saying, as an economist, I'm not surprised that once you allow paid plasma donation in, it's going to undercut the volunteer sector. Unquote. He is delighted with the change in direction at CBS, and that's change in direction from CBS is a move against paying donors for plasma. He says about CBS, it's a Christmas gift that they've come to their senses and they're going to try to collect more blood on a voluntary basis from Canadians. So, Madam Speaker, I'm really proud of our health minister. I think our health minister is the best health minister Alberta has ever had. Madam Speaker, she is generous, she's kind, and she's caring, and she listens to the people of Alberta. She restored the cuts that the PCs were proposing to make in the 2015 election, and she has done an admirable job with the board of AHS. She's worked collaboratively with them. She's also worked collaboratively with the doctors and saved Albertans $500 million. Madam Speaker, that's what I call leadership. Our health minister is working so hard every day that, you know, I don't know how she does it. She has to keep all of these things in her head. She's got a massive portfolio. She's also the Deputy Premier. And Madam Speaker, this is the kind of leadership that Albertans deserve.
And visits everybody's hospitals.
She visits everybody's hospitals. So, Madam Speaker, I want to talk a little bit about my personal experience as an operating room nurse. Earlier I talked a bit about how things like plasma are too precious to be left up to the devices of the free market. And Madam Speaker, Albertans want to know that these types of products are there for them when they need it. And I've had firsthand experience. And I respect the member for Fort McMurray Wood Buffalo as a first responder. I can't imagine the things that he's seen. You know, I could never do that, Madam Speaker. I've seen a lot of things in the operating room, but I have a lot of respect for that member and all first responders. So, Madam Speaker, by the time people get to the operating room, they may have lost a lot of blood, and they expect the plasma to be there when they need it. And I know that by banning paid donations, it'll ensure that we have a secure supply. We've seen in other jurisdictions where they have a profit-driven motive for people to sell their plasma, it depletes the donor base. And people, well, you know, the members on the other side are disputing the evidence that I just read about the Saskatoon experiment, Madam Speaker. And it's an experiment. You know, we're seeing the results of this experiment because it's new. We have to look at other jurisdictions that have gone through this. And I don't think we should leave our blood donor base up to an experiment of a wild, crazy idea from the folks over there who don't even want to replace frontline workers when they quit, Madam Speaker. This is dangerous, and the Wild Rose can't be trusted with our health system. They want to send people to other provinces and to the U.S., and now they're talking about having people paid for their donations. And we see in Saskatchewan that this is not working. It's not working, Madam Speaker. The CEO of Canadian Blood Services says this is not working. So that's why we are moving to ban paid donations. And it fits the evidence, Madam Speaker. That's what we need to make decisions based on, is evidence. So I know, for example, I'll talk about one particular instance that I recall in the operating room. A gentleman was skiing in the winter, and, of course in the winter, but he was skiing and he fell on his ski pole, Madam Speaker, went into his abdomen. And it didn't penetrate his abdomen, but he had a really hard, blunt trauma incident. So I don't know which facility he was skiing at, but the closest one maybe would be Nikiska. So think about the transport from after he's been found and airlifted out of there, traveling to the Foothills Medical Center. Then he has to go through emergency to be assessed. Oftentimes they have a CT scan to see what kind of internal injuries they have. And then the trauma surgeons. So we kind of get called all of a sudden. It's like, okay, there's a patient coming to the operating room. If you were on your lunch break, now you got to go back to work. And we were proud of that, Madam Speaker. A lot of times, and this isn't, I'm not trying to disrespect other units, but in other units, nurses would often, when they go on their breaks, they would leave the unit to try to get away from things. And I totally respect that. And I did that too. And in the operating room, I'm not trying to say operating room nurses are any better, but we would make sure we sit in the lunchroom that's close to the emergency room, the emergency operating room, so that if there was an emergency, we could go back immediately, because we knew that things happen quickly. So that was the case in this situation, Madam Speaker. And so the gentleman came in. He was actually talking to us. He was alert, oriented, everything. He just seemed fine. So we put him to sleep. As soon as we put him to sleep, his blood pressure started to crash, and things happened really quickly. I think, if I remember correctly, I think this was actually one of my first trauma emergencies, and I was feeling a bit confident, so I sent my fellow circulating nurse for her break. I'm like, oh, I've got it under control, and that was a big mistake. As soon as the surgeons cut into the gentleman's abdomen, the blood hit the ceiling. He had so much internal bleeding. There was so much pressure inside his abdomen. There was blood everywhere. And, I might have had to change my scrubs after that, Madam Speaker. It was a pretty traumatic moment. So I called some help back right away, because what you need right away is sponges. But you know what? Another thing we needed right away, Madam Speaker, is plasma. We needed plasma for that patient. And, I hesitate to consider what it would have been like if we had a paid plasma donation system. What if we left it up to the free market? What if people were more interested in selling their blood for profit? And I can't necessarily blame those people. They might be in a tough situation that they need the cash. And I get that. But that's why we're doing things like increasing the Alberta Child Benefit System to expand supports for low-income families. That's why we're reducing school fees for low-income families, and all families for that matter. So, Madam Speaker, there are other ways that we can look after people that may be financially motivated to sell their blood products, because this is too much of a precious thing to leave up to chance. Albertans, when they're doing any kind of activity, they want to know that there's a system there that's going to protect them and support them. And things like our public health care system.
Standing Order 29-2A comes into effect. 5 minutes of questions and comments. The Honourable Member for Calgary.
Curry.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. It's a pleasure to get up on 29-2A and have some questions and comments for my colleague, the Honourable Member from Banff Cochrane, who I think made some very passionate points. And as somebody who's a fellow skier, I hope to never fall on my ski pole, because that sounds terrible. And I would, thank the work that you and other medical professionals do throughout the province to help those who have unexpected trauma incidences, and I'm sure get very fine care from the nurses and doctors in our healthcare system. So, you sort of talked at length about, how selling to the highest bidder would be a problem versus our current system. You also spoke about some logical inconsistencies that the opposition often puts forward. So since there was, you had a bit of an interrupted speech due to various points of order, I think some of them related in a can dish but cannot take sort of way, I was wondering if you could sort of draw a line for us through your argument, draw a line through your argument of how selling to the highest bidder, Saskatchewan's risky ideological experiment that they've been doing, how that hurts Albertans, how it doesn't help everyday Albertans, and how the logical inconsistencies of what the opposition had been proposing also does not help everyday Albertans. And I was just wondering if you could give us a quick summary there, just to sort of draw it a line, since you were a bit interrupted during your presentation.
Cochrane?
Thank you very much to the member for Calgary-Craig for those insightful comments and the question. I'll talk a little bit more about the Saskatchewan experiment, Madam Speaker. I would just read a little bit more from this article here, because as I was listening to the member, I was just kind of looking at this a bit further. And there's some really, this is a great article, actually. I encourage all members to read it once I table it this afternoon. But it's got a lot of quotes from experts, and that's why I like this article. Sometimes news is some opinion mixed in with quotes, and this is a lot of quotes from experts. So here is, I believe this is, again, the CEO for Canadian Blood Services, and he's quoted as saying, "Right now what's happening is that the private companies are actually putting Saskatchewan at a deficit supply." He continues on, "They're not helping us become more self-sufficient, and so we're very happy that Canadian Blood Services is speaking out. But the government of Saskatchewan and our federal government have to listen." They have to listen, Madam Speaker. That's a key point. And what this government is doing is listening to people like Canadian Blood Services experts. They're listening to people like frontline workers and doctors and nurses who know about this, who live this every day. And like I said earlier, this isn't something that we can put up to chance. The free market works great in certain things. Like when I want to go buy a car, it makes sense for me to shop around, look for the best deal I can find, and compare and contrast. And that's how that is a perfect example of the free market, and I support that 100%. But things like healthcare, we see instances in the United States where they have a profit-motivated system. People go bankrupt when they can't afford, they get cancer and they lose their house, Madam Speaker, because they can't afford to pay their bills. And that's not what it means to be Canadian. In Canada, we look out for one another, and we do that in a fair way by paying taxes. I know that, I may not know people who go into the healthcare system, but I know as a Canadian that it's part of my duty to support people when they're down. That's why we have a social safety net in Canada, and we are, here in Alberta, we are an important part of that social safety net. And I'm proud that on this side of the House, we are supporting a publicly funded and publicly delivered healthcare system, because that's proven evidence and how you get results and how you take care of people. So, Madam Speaker, I'm really proud to support the Health Minister in this, and I'm really proud of our government for moving to ban plasma donations for profit. And, Madam Speaker, I was listening to the Bill 2 debate